Wife slept with a rich man. Asterisk I had never suspected that anything was wrong with my marriage until the day everything fell apart. My name is Daniel, and I thought I had a perfect life. I had a beautiful wife, Grace, and we had been married for 5 years. We lived in a comfortable house, and I worked as an architect. Things weren't always easy, but we made it work. Or so I thought. Asterisk at first, Grace was everything to me. She was smart, ambitious, and beautiful. We'd met in college, and I'd fallen in love with her instantly. Our chemistry was undeniable, and when we got married, it felt like the beginning of the rest of our lives together. But somewhere along the way, the spark between us started to fade. Asterisk I noticed the change in Grace long before she admitted it. Her laughter became less frequent, and her smiles felt forced. She started to spend more time away from home, often claiming she was working late or had errands to run. I didn't mind, at first. After all, life can get busy, and she had her own career ambitions. But soon, I began to notice the little signs, the long hours at work, the secretive phone calls, and the way she would be glued to her phone, hiding it whenever I walked into the room. Asterisk I tried to ignore it. I wanted to believe that it was just a phase, that we were going through a rough patch. But as the months passed, the distance between us only grew. And then one night, it all came crashing down. Asterisk it started like any other evening. I came home from work, expecting the usual routine, dinner, maybe a movie, a quiet night together. But when I walked through the door, something felt off. The house was eerily quiet. No TV, no sound of Grace in the kitchen. I called out for her, but there was no answer. I walked to the bedroom, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Asterisk Grace was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at her phone. Her expression was distant, as if she were lost in thought. When she heard me come in, she put the phone down quickly, her eyes wide with surprise, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Asterisk Grace, what's going on? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trying to steady my nerves. Asterisk she looked at me for a moment, her eyes filled with uncertainty, before letting out a long sigh. I need to tell you something, Daniel, she said, her voice soft but heavy with regret. Asterisk my stomach sank. I braced myself, not knowing what to expect, but the sinking feeling in my chest told me that this wasn't going to end well. What followed was the last thing I ever thought I'd hear. Asterisk, I've been seeing someone else, she said, her voice trembling. A man. A wealthy man. And I'm tired of this marriage. Asterisk the words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room seemed to spin around me. My thoughts were a tangled mess of disbelief and confusion. Grace, the woman I had built my life with, the woman I had loved with everything I had been unfaithful. And not just with anyone, a rich man. Someone who could offer her everything I couldn't. Asterisk, I didn't mean for it to happen, Daniel, she continued, her eyes welling up with tears, pleading for some sort of understanding. But I don't feel the same anymore. I'm not happy. Asterisk her words were a blur as they washed over me, each one cutting deeper than the last. I wanted to scream, to shout at her for the betrayal, for tearing apart the life we had built. But all I could do was stand there, numb, unable to comprehend the enormity of what she was telling me. Asterisk I tried to talk to her, to understand, to fix things. But she had already made up her mind. Grace had fallen for someone else, someone who could give her the life she thought she deserved. And I was nothing more than a man she had grown tired of. The weight of her words suffocated me. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who didn't care about the vows we'd taken. Asterisk I felt my knees weaken, but I didn't let myself fall. I took a step back, giving myself space to breathe, but my mind raced. The life I thought I had was slipping away, piece by piece. I searched for any hint of regret in her eyes, any sign that this wasn't just an inevitable step for her, but there was nothing. She was resolute. The woman I had loved was now a stranger standing in front of me, telling me she was no longer in love with me. Asterisk Grace, I whispered, my voice raw, how could you do this? Asterisk she looked away, wiping a tear from her cheek. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know what happened, but I can't go back. I've tried. I really have. Asterisk her apology seemed hollow, empty. It wasn't an apology for what she had done, it was an apology for the consequences she now faced. She wasn't sorry for betraying me. She was sorry that I was finally seeing the truth. Asterisk the weight of her confession pressed down on me like an avalanche. The life I had known, the promises we had made to each other, seemed to crumble before my eyes. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it right. She had chosen someone else, someone more powerful, more successful. Someone who could offer her a life I couldn't. And in that moment, I understood, asterisk this wasn't just about an affair. This was about her choosing a life of wealth and comfort over the man who had stood by her through everything. I had spent so many years building my career, trying to make her happy, trying to build something stable. And yet, none of it was enough. Grace had decided she wanted more. And she had found it, asterisk that night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart shattered. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we had for the allure of money and a new life? Asterisk, but in the depths of my despair, something changed. I realized I didn't need to stay in a marriage where I wasn't wanted. I didn't need to fight for someone who had already made her choice. I had worked hard for everything I had. I had built my career, my home, my life with Grace. And now it was time to take it all back, asterisk I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I wasn't going to fight for a marriage that had already been broken by her infidelity. I was done. It was time to move on. It was time to reclaim my life, piece by piece, and rebuild something worth fighting for, myself, asterisk I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for sure, this was the beginning of something new, and I wasn't going to let her destroy the man I was meant to be, asterisk the days that followed were a blur of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and family members. I knew Grace would fight me on everything, she wouldn't give up easily. But I wasn't going to back down. I had been betrayed, and I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, not after what she had done, asterisk Grace didn't take the news of my decision to divorce her well. She begged me to reconsider, to fix things, but I had already made up my mind. I had given her every opportunity to come clean, to work through our issues. But she had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. How could I look at her and pretend everything was fine after she had chosen a stranger over me? The woman I loved, the woman I had committed my life to, had decided she was better off without me. So, I was going to make sure she felt the full weight of her decision, asterisk every time she tried to explain herself, to ask for another chance, I felt the anger inside me rise. I'm sorry became the phrase I heard constantly, but it did nothing to erase the years of loyalty I had given her, nor the devastation her affair had caused. I couldn't understand how she thought she could fix this. How did she think I could ever trust her again, asterisk I fought for everything, our house, the bank accounts, our assets. The marriage, the life we built together, was mine to take back. I wasn't going to let her walk away with any of it. Grace had chosen a life with someone else, someone with more money, more influence, and more power. And now she would face the reality of that choice. She would have to deal with the consequences of her actions, and I was going to make sure of it, asterisk the divorce was brutal. It wasn't just the financial battle, it was the emotional toll it took on both of us. Grace tried to manipulate the situation. Playing the victim, claiming I was the one tearing apart our family, that I was the one who had driven her to another man. But I wasn't buying it. Her tears, her guilt-laden speeches, meant nothing to me anymore. I wasn't the one who had broken the vows, I wasn't the one who had sought comfort in the arms of another, asterisk in court, I watched her squirm. Her lawyer tried every trick in the book, attempting to paint me as the villain, but I stood firm. It wasn't just about the money or the assets anymore. It was about the principle. She had taken everything from me, and now, I was taking it all back, asterisk when the settlement was finalized, it was clear who had lost everything. Grace was left with nothing but the clothes on her back. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, every asset we had accumulated together was mine. I had been methodical in ensuring that I was in control of everything that mattered. She had no claim to anything, *, the wealthy man she had turned to couldn't help her now. He had abandoned her the moment the divorce papers were signed. I knew he had only been a temporary distraction, an escape from the marriage she no longer cared about. The moment I pulled the rug out from under her, he was nowhere to be found. She had thought she could find happiness with him, but in the end, all she had left was regret. I watched her walk out of the courthouse, defeated and broken. I felt no sympathy for her. The woman I once knew was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't even face the consequences of her own actions. All of her grand plans, the future she thought she would have, had been shattered in a matter of weeks. And as for me? I walked away from the divorce with my dignity intact, knowing I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself, and now, I was free to move on with my life. Grace, on the other hand, would have to live with the mess she had created, *, and that was the last time I ever saw her, *. Grace came to me one last time, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She stood at the door of the apartment I had moved into, looking lost, defeated. I had expected her to come begging for a second chance, but what I saw was a woman who had been humbled by her own actions. The woman who had once been confident, strong, and assured now seemed small, broken, and fragile. I never imagined I'd see her like this, at least not after everything she'd done. But here she was, standing at my doorstep, a shadow of the woman I had once loved, *, I'm sorry, she said quietly, her voice hoarse, raw with emotion. I never thought it would end like this. I didn't realize how much I would lose. *, I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process the woman standing before me. This was Grace, my Grace, who had once been so full of life and ambition. And now, she was nothing more than a woman who had fallen from her pedestal, a woman who had made a choice that had cost her everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had traded everything I had offered her for the fleeting promises of a man with money and power. And now, she had nothing but regret, *. You had everything, I said, my voice cold, detached. There was no malice in my words, just truth. And you threw it all away. Now, you're left with nothing. *. I watched as she winced at the truth, her shoulders slumping under the weight of my words. She had no retort, no defense. What could she say? Her affair with a wealthy man, her decision to abandon our marriage, had led her here, to this moment, standing at my door, with nothing but sorrow and regret in her eyes, *. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face, leaving dark streaks on her cheeks. I know. I made a huge mistake. Her voice was a whisper now, as if the weight of her own guilt was choking her, *. I didn't feel the need to comfort her. I didn't even want to. Grace had made her choices, and it was no longer my responsibility to help her bear the burden. She had chosen to break me, to break us. She had chosen to betray the vows we had made together for the hollow promise of wealth and luxury. And now, she would have to face the consequences of those choices, *. There was a time, not too long ago, when I would have rushed to her side, when I would have tried to fix things, to salvage whatever we had left. But that was before I realized that the love I had for her was gone. She had stripped it away, piece by piece, with every lie, every secret, and every selfish act. I had spent so much of my life trying to make her happy, trying to give her everything she wanted. But now, I saw clearly that no matter what I gave her, it would never be enough. She had been searching for something outside of our marriage, outside of our life together, and she had found it in someone who promised her a different future. Now, that future was empty, *. I let out a long breath, the air feeling thick with the tension of the moment. Grace was still standing there, waiting for some sort of reaction from me. But I had nothing left to give. I didn't owe her anything anymore, *. I rebuilt my life, Grace, I said, my tone flat. It was the first time in a long while that I had felt a sense of clarity. I had done what I needed to do to move on. I had fought through the pain, the heartbreak, and now, I was standing on solid ground. I was free. I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. I'm not the same man I was when I was with you. And I don't want to go back to that. She looked up at me, the pain in her eyes raw and unguarded. I could see it, the realization that she had lost me, that she had lost everything she had once taken for granted. The lavish lifestyle, the comfort of our home, the stability of our marriage, gone. All of it had been exchanged for the fantasy of a life she thought she wanted. But now, that fantasy had turned into a nightmare, and she was left to face the reality of her decisions. You're right, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I lost everything. I didn't offer her any comfort. I didn't try to soften the blow. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. The consequences of her actions were hers to bear. There was no way for me to fix what was broken. She had destroyed our marriage, and no apology could ever undo that. As she turned and walked away, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of closure. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had fought for, was gone. But in her place, I had found the strength to move on, to rebuild, and to find peace. I had given her everything, and in the end, she had thrown it all away. I had to let her go, not just physically, but emotionally as well. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of her mistakes. And as for Grace, she had learned the hard way that no amount of wealth, no amount of luxury, could ever replace what she had lost. No matter how much money her new lover had, it could never fill the emptiness she had created by abandoning the one person who had truly loved her. Now, she would have to live with the consequences of her choices, alone in the life she had built for herself. And me? I walked away, free.